This week it's time for a restoration project. Hi, welcome back to St Blazey Model World, and I'm Roger. I am frequently asked about restoration projects on diecast vehicles, and I thought this might be a nice opportunity to have a look at one. Here we've got two vehicles exactly the same, and they are both play worn. What does play worn mean? What can we do about it? And should we restore? After all, don't these models hold more value in their original condition? Lots of questions to be answered. Let's start having a look. Now, when we talk about models that are play worn, that means exactly what it says on the tin. These models have been played with. And why should they not have been? They were produced as toys for young children to play with in an imaginary world, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We got two examples here of the same model, and they're roughly in exactly the same sort of condition, play worn. So we'll just spin them round and let's see what we see. So these two models are in more or less the same sort of level of wear, in exactly the same sort of condition. Both with bits of paint missing in the key areas that you can see. We've got some play damage to the decals on the side here as well. And of course they're both dirty. They've been around for a number of years. These things really are quite old. They're sort of well in excess of 20 years old. So let's have a look and see what we can do. As always with a restoration project, there are two procedures here that are not dangerous but maybe hazardous, and as always, safety first. If you are a younger modeler, please ask somebody a little bit older to help you with the stages that are a little bit tricky, and I'll flag those up as we move through the video. Restoration, of course, means a degree of damage. If you're a regular to the channel, you'll know that I don't particularly favour taking a model back to bare metal, but on this occasion it's the only option. And before we destroy what we do have, it's important to record what's there. And with that in mind, we need to focus on this decal here. We need to be able to replicate that milk decal once we've got the restoration project complete. I'm going to pick the best example, and as always, we'll take a still photograph of that, and hopefully we'll be able to reproduce that on our computer. Once we do look underneath, we can see that there are two rivets that appear to be holding the chassis and the interior together to the body of the model. One at the front, which is of course, where is it, just here, and one further along at the back, just there. This is very similar to the EFE models that I've dismantled in the past. So the next stage is to drill those out. And this is one point where, if you are a younger modeler, please ask somebody a little bit older to help you. So there we are, that's our two rivets drilled out. All that remains now is to separate the chassis from the body. If it doesn't come away, just need to drill a tiny bit more. And there we are. Once we've got our chassis removed from the bodywork, we can now, of course, look to removing the glass, the glazing that's on our model. Hopefully that's just going to come out. Let's get a pair of pliers and have a quick look. So we'll take our pliers and Nice little tab in there. We'll just give that a tug. There we are. That's our glazing, the cab windows. All that we need to do with that is to give it a wash, really, because it's in good condition. It has got a split on it just here, but that won't be visible on the refurbished model. And the bits of debris that you saw flying out there, they're just the remains of the rivet that we've just drilled out. So now we've got basically a lump of metal, and it's in pretty bad condition. The next stage is, of course, to strip this down. And as I say, normally I don't favour the full strip down to bare metal, but on this occasion, it's really the way to go. Well, the strip down is now complete, as you can see. Now, returning a die-cast model back to its base metal is usually a chemical process. On this occasion, I've used some Nitromor's paint stripper because that's what I had in stock. But the next project that I undertake will involve a different product that's been recommended to me by one of my viewers. Now, that chemical process using a paint stripper is hazardous. And again, if you are a younger model maker, please ask somebody older to help you with it. And even if you're an experienced model maker, I highly recommend the use of some safety glasses and some protective gloves, because this stuff is pretty violent and you don't want it on your skin, and you certainly do not want it on anywhere where it can be absorbed into the body and the bloodstream. Now, an alternative to using a paint stripper is to dip the model, or have it soaking rather, in some caustic soda and hot water. That will involve an amount of work with something like a used toothbrush to remove the excess paint once it starts to dissolve, but it will do the job. But again, it is a chemical process, safety first. Once we have our model down to bare metal, it's a good time to address any blemishes in the casting. And bear in mind now that we are no longer working with what could be legitimately described as a mint example. Our refurbished product will look good, but we have had an impact on the value by refurbishing it rather than leaving it as it was. As it happens on this occasion, there isn't really too much to tidy up. We might just take out a couple of these seam line markings that you can see here and here on the tank, but other than that, it's good to go. So just a little bit of work with a needle file, we'll tidy those up, and the next stage is to give the bodywork and the chassis and the glazing a wash with some warm water, bit of washing up liquid, and a toothbrush, and that will remove any contaminants, and then we'll be ready to start spraying our body of the model in primer. So here is our model in primer, and it already looks vastly improved from the original example on the left hand side. As always with spray painting, remember, well ventilated environment. If you can, do it outdoors. If you have to work inside, please make sure you have plenty of ventilation and a breathing mask of some sort, because these paints do give off fumes and you don't want to be overcome or land yourself in trouble. The next stage, of course, is to give this model a coat of white, and that's one of the reasons why I picked this. It's a nice easy one to do, especially if you want to try something as a starter project. Almost everybody has got a can of primer and a can of white paint. So we'll get this outside again and give it a spray in white, starting with the underneath of the model. I always start with the underneath, the inside there. We've got to get that cab white to replicate the original, but the reason why I like to start underneath is that you tend not to have overlapping spray, whereas if you started on the top and then went to the underneath, you'd find that some of that spray would dribble down the sides of the model on the outside, and you probably would be working for nothing at that point. So always start with the inside, dust coat first, what we call a dust coat, very light spray. Let that dry thoroughly and then start to apply your top coats. Well, we've applied our top coat of white and we've allowed it 24 hours to dry. I've replicated the decal that was on the model, And here we have the finished example in the foreground, and what we started with here in the background. There wasn't really much to choose between these two examples for this project, but remember, this is just a brief video about a starter project for those of you who want to give this particular restoration technique a go. Let's just spin them around quickly and have a brief look at how they ended up. And as we do rotate, you can see that they really are quite different now. The one on the left currently is the reworked example, and you can see how much better it looks. Have we done anything? Have we created anything of more value? No, absolutely not, because we cannot now describe the reworked example as a mint original. Colour isn't right. There are a few other issues as well, but have we changed? Have we created something of vastly more value? No. It's just a little project, really, just something to show you what's possible. And if you have a collection of vehicles, you might want to consider refurbishing one or two examples that you have in your collection that are not quite as good as they could be. That's all this video was really about. Just out of interest, the biggest change really was on the glazing, and I'll just go back there now to the front view, and you can see the reworked example on the left, how much clearer that glazing is, simply for having a wash with some soap washing liquid, dishwashing liquid, toothbrush, let it dry, warm water is easy stuff. But you know, I'm quite proud of the result there. We haven't got anything more valuable, but we have got a lovely little model. What else could we have done with it if we wanted to take the not the restoration, but the project a bit further? What could we have done? Well, there's a couple of things that are very obvious with this one. We could have painted in some silver on the walkway to represent that more accurately, and of course the caps of the individual cells that lie within the tanker itself. And another thing that we could have done is that we could have detailed in the rear lights. A few things to think about there, a bit of food for thought. As regards to the logo, which came out pretty well, I'm afraid I'm not going to tell you how I replicated that right now, because I am about to make a video on resources and where you go to do that type of thing. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your comments. What do you think? Which one looks best? You tell me. We're back to my one of my previous videos, aren't we? Old bus, new bus. Which one is best? It's a matter of opinion, taste, personal preference. But there we are. Okay, that's it for this one. We'll wrap it up there. Take care, stay safe. See you next time. Bye-bye now from St Blazey Model World. Bye-bye.